basically getting no traction with investors on Web3, and nobody's even taking your call at that point. And started messing around. Saw the demo of GPT-4, and they, it was that first one where they kind of like drew a UI and then like gave the picture to it, and it like wrote the code. And I was like, everything's going to change. I'm going to start messing around with this.
Hey everybody, welcome to CTO Confidential, and I am here today with Scott Werner, who is the CEO and founder of Sublayer, and also has a newsletter called Works on My Machine that I've been reading online, especially because you threw some nostalgia in the last one. So I saw the Nintendo cartridges, and I was really psyched. And you've also started another newsletter that appeared on Hacker News, which is a fiction as well. So this is going to be a really awesome conversation. I think we're going to cover a lot. So welcome to the show, Scott.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. Excited to chat.
Amazing. So I mean, let's kick it off with. My business partner and I met you at an event called Artificial Ruby that you run in New York City, and of course we found out you were from Long Island, where we are. So we had built an event on Long Island. You had gone into the city to build yours, which was really awesome. So I'd love to talk. Well, I guess let's talk a little. I always kind of start people off with your origin story, how you got into development, what your career was like, and then what led you into starting your own business, and then, of course, doing the meetups and getting involved in Ruby.
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. Going back to the origin story. I mean, it's funny, like, as I've been getting to know you, I've been thinking of how similar our backgrounds are. And almost thinking like our, the inspirations that we've taken because of our background. So I actually also graduated college in 2008 into the great financial crisis of nobody hiring and everybody getting laid off. Also with not a technical degree, I had an economics degree, and so like nobody was getting hired. Economists were definitely not getting hired back then, and so had to figure out like, what am I going to do now that I'm that I'm in the workforce and nobody's hiring, and especially don't really have any marketable skills. And so it was a very kind of like winding road to get here. I was grading standardized tests for a while. I never did the enterprise rent-a-car stuff, but I bartended for a little while. One short stop at call center tech support for ATMs. So like,
wow.
There's the what goes on behind the scenes with ATMs is actually really fascinating. That the communication with the network and how they get refilled and all of that stuff is probably a story for another day. But
Wow.
Sitting in the call center talking to technicians was kind of that first real job. But during that, I also had like a lot of free time to really kind of explore software, explore all kinds of different ideas, and like, I want to get out of here. I want to do something new, which got me into open source, got me into Ruby. I was actually, were you around Ruby when Why the Lucky Stiff was around? Does that ring a bell?
No, it doesn't.
So he was this fictional character that was like all about like the fun and joy of programming, creativity, and all that kind of stuff. And so I was in Pittsburgh at the time. He gave a talk at CMU, and I was like just getting into Ruby. I'm like, I don't know enough about this kind of stuff yet. Like, I'm not going to go, but like, I'd love to see him talk. It was the last public talk before he disappeared and deleted all his open source. And so that like sticks in my mind of like a formative moment. But so I, through that job, ended up, doing a lot of open source, getting my hands dirty, and then starting at a design agency doing kind of PHP sites. So I listened to your arena call where you were talking about like Joomla, and like our stuff was on Cake PHP.
Yeah.
So like it seems like we have like a very similar background there. Um, but then through that experience there, the whole just like always doing side projects, always screwing around, built some stuff, found my way to New York, where I was like an early engineer at this startup called Side Tour, where we were kind of like local things to do. The time it was like 2012, and like Eater NY and like all of those kind of blogs of just like, here's some cool shit going on in the city, was happening. And so like our
Right.
product was all about like, let's get out and do it and like go out and see it. I feel like I'm just rambling.
No,
But
no,
I'm,
it's
I'm
okay.
sure I'm leading up. I promise you I'm leading up to somewhere. So we got acquired by Groupon.
Hmm.
Spent a few years at Groupon doing kind of like the local things to do stuff, or their local things to do product. So like
Right.
ticketed events. Um, Left there and partnered with one of the founders of Side Tour to start SaySpring, which was where I was the CTO, which is kind of like a voice assistant prototyping platform. So
Okay.
like think like Envision, but for Alexa apps or Alexa
Okay.
skills.
Okay.
We got acquired by Adobe, and then I spent 4 years at Adobe, building out what's now we brought the voice stuff into XD, and then XD kind of got shut down.
They got shut down.
But we kind of left that and started building out what's now Adobe Podcast. I had left before it became Adobe Podcast. Kind of
Got it.
taking a lot of the research that was going on in Adobe's audio research group and productizing it.
Very cool. Very cool. So,
Which
so it's so yeah. Keep going, because I
no
was
no
gonna
go ahead.
say it's so interesting. You kind of talk, because I love this point in everybody's story, because I had this point too where you kind of build up to like the bigger company, right? So you're at Adobe as an engineer. I was at the Not Worldwide as an engineer, and I was kind of like on the track, like I was going to try something, like I was trying to go. I had this opportunity. Were we going to start the business, and you ultimately went the entrepreneur route, or are we going to stay kind of as an engineer? And someone asked last night, and I think you were talking to them too, and they were like, "Oh, isn't it so great being an entrepreneur? You make your own hours." And I was like sitting there thinking, like, I have to be honest. In terms of lifestyle, it's actually better to be at a big company. And like, I'm always curious. Like, I imagine that working at Adobe was pretty awesome. Make great salary, nobody's holding a gun to your head at a lot of these places. Maybe they are now, because we're seeing a lot of that. The chickens come home to roost. But I said to him, I go, I actually have very fond memories of being an employee, and taking the leap into entrepreneurship wasn't this, oh, I hate my job, I hate working for other people moment. It was like, I'm going to take, it's just an interesting risk. And I always say, for an engineer, it's an interesting kind of conundrum, because a lot of people, I think, take the leap because they can't do anything else, and I'm like, well, you definitely could do something else, and it likely paid better, but you went the entrepreneur route.
Oh, that's so true, and I think about that all the time, especially the entrepreneurship. It's like I've also heard it talked about like the highs are really high, but the lows are really low. When you're an employee, it's like it's pretty even keel, and so when you're in the lowest of the lows, it's like, what did I've made a huge mistake. you know
Yeah, that's for sure. It's seasonal. It definitely has this like boom and bust.
yeah.
And so, what was the moment that made you say, "Okay, I'm going to leave Adobe, and like I'm going to do my own thing now"?
Yeah, so I mean, I had kind of already gone through that at Groupon, and so
Mm-hmm.
I'd kind of done it twice at that point, and I feel like I've noticed in myself that like as soon as I'm kind of like phoning it in, like that's a signal. I'm just
Yeah.
like just punching the clock, not really pushing myself, not learning, but also like you're working a day job, so you don't have enough time outside of it to like explore your interests, and so you're like, I'm just like stuck basically.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
like that happened at about 3 years at Groupon. It happened. I was at Adobe through the pandemic, so it was also like a little bit of a who knows what's going to happen to the world kind of situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like right around 4 years, it was just like I'm not learning anything. I'm kind of just like just punching the clock and fighting against everything, and like looking back at my two startup experiences, being like that was a lot more fun. Um, And so like almost right at the 4 year mark at Adobe, it was like, okay, that's it. And SaySpring had gone through an accelerator in New York called Entrepreneurs Roundtable Accelerator. I got to know the team really well. I stayed in touch. I went through it the last time as a CTO, and so it was an amazing opportunity to go through it as CEO again, which is like completely night and day experience. Like as CTO, I was headphones on programming, which also doesn't exist now as much anymore. But as the CEO, like all of the, how do you build a business plan? How do you build a business model? How do you pitch it? How do you, talk to investors about it? How do you think through all of this? Like all of those pieces, the CEO of SaySpring, my co-founder, then went through, and I kind of didn't. So, it was a huge learning experience. It was like an incredible opportunity there. But AI happened, and now it's kind of like pivoting around, trying to figure out, what it means to be an early stage startup in this world where if somebody can vibe code your SaaS on a live stream.
Yeah,
right.
What can you do? I just got out of stand up with Justin, and we were talking about kind of like our conversation last night, and I said, a part of me almost has this feeling that aesthetics is going to start to matter again more, because now they'll be like, I was like, look, you go to there's 100 bottles of water, and a lot of times you pick the water based on the shape of the bottle, and like even if it's like a few dollars more expensive, it's sort of like we're going to enter a world where there's going to be a lot of SaaS. I don't think people still want to deploy their own software. Like I think that the vast majority of people who are business owners, I even think about it from our standpoint, I'm like, it's still effort to build it, maintain it. When something goes wrong, I still got to answer the Slack message of like, oh, let me figure out what happened. And oh yeah, that thing. And then also you get the feature request from your own team, and they're like, you're like, wait a minute. Like if this was a SaaS, you couldn't make a feature request. Like get the heck out of here, Now you feel bad like having to entertain them. So there's all these like little pitfalls, but I think that maybe there's a world where there's like an aesthetics that matter, that there's going to be maybe like almost like a mom and pop software industry. I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but will there be like 100 versions of CRMs now? Like when there used to be maybe 50 versions or whatever. Now there's like even more. You have 1,000 to pick from. And how do we get ahead? So you've kind of been iterating on some products now. So you get started with Sublayer. Where did you start? And then kind of now we're here with AI. What's your kind of thoughts on how to stand out in this crazy world?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. Like the idea that I actually joined ERA with, that I had been kind of like developing and pitched them on, was in Web3 actually. It was like back when NFTs were big.
Oh, I remember this well.
And also went through like was at demo day and kind of demoed something, and then like that winter that all fell apart.
Yeah. Well, Sam Bankman-Fried pretty much single-handedly destroyed the entire industry.
I know.
I'm like, man.
But yeah, so like my experience has been a lot of pivoting around. I started the AI side of things was basically getting no traction with investors on Web3, and nobody's even taking your call at that point. And started messing around. Saw the demo of GPT-4, and they, it was that first one where they kind of like drew a UI and then like gave the picture to it, and it like wrote the code, and I was like, everything's going to change. I'm going to start messing around with this, and built like an initial version of kind of like a product management tool that your user stories built prompts to have it write code. And back then I used to say stuff like, a Jira ticket is nothing, but what's a Jira ticket if not like a prompt builder to get a software engineer to change code. And and then like as things went on, we kind of took it further, raised some money, and kind of ran into a wall as like the context windows weren't growing as fast as we had expected, and weren't able to actually get it to deliver on that promise of like, I write a ticket, I hit I hit start and then the code comes out the other end. Which we're still not really there exact. Like we're close. We're much closer than we were 3 years ago. But
we baked the same feature into our tool Fin forecasting that we built the project management portion of it. And originally it was designed to like, we really wanted to forecast our profitability and then have like in real time people's time tracking. And then someone baked into it, one of our engineers was like, oh, I built put Claude Code behind it. So now the ticket goes right into Claude Code. And the thing we started running into, it's not so much the context windows anymore. And even sometimes it came out pretty good, especially if you were deploying to like Fly or Vercel, like it would do the auto deploys. You start running into all these merge conflicts because like the agents are all kind of operating independently, and it sort of created a lot of this like annoying kind of work. And then it's not there, but it was definitely something I thought was cool. This idea of the Kanban, let the agent scoop the ticket, leave the comments, and then ask for feedback. But I still found myself being like, it's just faster for me to do this in the terminal, and then I can steer it. And it was always harder if I let it run through like a lot of people are very into that Ralph loop thing now, where it's like I let it run overnight, and then I'm like, yeah, but then like you got to test all that software the next. Like it's not. I do wish we were there where you could just throw it over the fence, but it's just not. I find that there's just so many little things that I want to correct that then I'm like, I'd actually rather just move a little bit slower than that and not have to do all that in the morning.
Right. Yeah. But I think it's gotten a lot further, and so like it's on that trajectory, right? I don't think it's going to stop.
There. No, I don't think so either. I think that the code, like we talked about yesterday, is like the code cost is definitely dropping. I think the biggest thing now is that, everybody's talking about it, the taste, the aesthetic, the user experiences that you can build. These are the things that are going to start to matter, because that's the stuff that AI kind of makes very generic over and over again. And so you have to kind of have this vision or just a new method of doing things. Like I think the way that we run our agency with forecasts, that piece is a little bit different. We didn't really learn that from somebody. We just like through running it, we were like, we really need to be able to see like when a contract's going to end, to be able to let people know like, hey, you got like a month left on this, they're not renewing, things like really to operate the agency in a different way. And then we kept running into this issue where people would go over time and budget, and then we would be like, wait a minute, we're not profitable, we have to fix this. But it's very specific to our business. So it's one of those things where I'm imagining that there will be very specific solutions. Like someone was on the show that talked about someone who built a CRM for window cleaners or something like super niche. And I think about that and I go, it is funny. Like you go into a platform like a Jobber, let's say, which is for like kind of like construction and things, but all the terminology is like generic. So like people are like, wait a minute, like I don't really understand. The software feels weird, as opposed to saying like if you're a landscaper, it's just like square footage. Like this is how you do your pricing. So I think we're entering almost maybe a cottage industry type of thing where there will be more of this. I guess this is the bet on the service arm of our business, which is there'll be more people who are like, I want the bespoke thing, but I need someone else to do it, because I think even when we get there, a non-software person may not get it.
Yeah, I definitely see that. And it reminds me of one of the comments I got on my newsletter a couple weeks ago, where somebody said that it almost seems like the suburbanization of code, where like, we used to have to be in the city, all just like bumping into each other. And like now we're starting to be able to spread out and be able to, like all of the things that happened with like, the rise of the suburbs, is that like those smaller local businesses kind of pop up that service, a local community and those kind of things. And like in the past that had to be a physical location, but now we can start to think of software as like, this, you needed to have a big engineering team. You needed to raise a lot of money to build a Jobber, but like now you talk to a handful of landscapers and you start to build out like a really niche specific product that like doesn't have the kind of market size that traditional investment is looking for, but um, it's economical to do that now, which is super super interesting.
It really is. And then you don't have to worry as much about scale. Like a lot of people always say that too. They're like, oh, how do you scale it? I go, well, if it wasn't a SaaS, I wouldn't really need to worry about that. If I had like 10 landscapers using it, then it's not as big of a deal. Or a couple of large construction companies were using my software. They could still be paying a good amount of money to support kind of us doing it. I don't really need to worry about 10,000 API calls moving through the system. It's just not, not something that's ever going to happen where it's like, oh, huge spike on Black Friday. I got to scale to millions of requests a second or something like that.
Right.
So it's super interesting.
Yeah, that's I think like when 37 Signals announced the like once philosophy.
Yeah.
That was something too that really struck me, that you don't need this like really complex like AWS infrastructure when you've got 50 customers, right?
That's exactly.
And you're not going to have more than 50. Like 60 customers don't exist in the world for this thing. So like I don't have to worry about, horizontally scaling my database or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, I love the once thing, and it was interesting because they kind of pivoted a little bit away from it, and then they came back around because what was so funny, he just re-announced it, and again, like the day before, we're building all these like open source kind of code bases, and I said it would be so cool to like almost cobble them to be able to like deploy them all on the same server, so you could pick like, I want the calendar solution, I want a Kanban solution, I want a time tracking solution, and just put those three things together under a single domain. And he released, that's like the future of once, and I go, that's actually really cool because now I could build a bunch of smaller tools. And if I had to go back and like redo our Fin philosophy a little bit, is I think I would have like segmented it and like broken it up so you could like subscribe to different parts of what we were trying to like, and you get really just pointy tools that could somehow talk to each other. So I'm always thinking about this idea of like each of these solutions could be deployed standalone, but they can also talk and communicate to one another, maybe with almost like an open claw like layer behind them. So I'm still like bursting with ideas. It's just more about how am I going to compose all these things together. I think less about like I got to make this one SaaS product and focus on it.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's
super interesting.
Yeah, same.
So it's very cool. So I wanted to kind of like taking a little pivot too. You did a fiction newsletter, some sci-fi, and so like this is like a total pivot. But I didn't even know about this. So one is, did you write all this yourself? Are you using AI guided? Like how are you kind of crafting these stories? What inspired you to do it?
Yeah, it was actually, it's been a surreal experience this week. Like we had this podcast scheduled and was not expecting what happened. So it's cool to talk through it. I'd been writing works on my machine, AI assisted, since for over a year now. And started dipping my toes into like fiction with some of the stuff in the beginning of this year, kind of through a bunch of like discussions and conversations with friends of like the anxiety around what does the future look like? Like, are we going to have jobs? Is the AI going to turn everything into paper clips? That, I started trying to explain my philosophy that I think it's going to be I think it's going to be just as like your day-to-day is just going to be just as mundane as it is today. It might seem fantastical for us to like look at from today and like look at what it's like tomorrow, but like tomorrow we're going to be like, it's another Saturday or just another Tuesday. And so started like exploring like, well, okay, so there's a quote from Friedrich Pohl that's like, good science fiction doesn't predict the car, it predicts the traffic jam. Mm-hmm. So like started just like digging around with Claude of like what are the first order effects, what are the second order effects, what are like what's going to need to happen, what's a traffic jam that's going to happen, and then like what are some jobs that are going to exist because of that, because of traffic jams existing. And so like if you think about that in cars, it's like, well, people are going to be sitting there for a while, so they're going to need some entertainment, so maybe we'll use radio and you'll listen to like music or listen to talk shows. So like not only are cars going to are going to exist, but like, you know, radio DJ, you know, DJs or like talk show hosts are going to exist now. And you kind of play that out. And so that was the genesis of this whole idea, was start to figure out these jobs. And then it got into some weird ones, and I'm like, Claude, can you actually just like write me a short story of like a day in the life of this, so I can understand it? The stories ended up being like really interesting, AI slop, but like really interesting. And so I was like, okay,
Just
let's
fun.
yeah. And so I started to see, it was like, okay, I want to see if I can make this into something that I'd want to share, put my name on and share. This started maybe about a couple months ago, like this whole idea, beginning of the year, this idea kind of started forming, and then put out the first one about a month ago, and then this latest one this week. And let's see, where's I going with that? The process. So the process, actually, I used a lot of the same techniques that we use in software development, where I've got a whole bunch of markdown documents. So instead of you know, my Claude.md or like architecture.md, I've got worldbible.md, I've got characters.md, I've got styleguide.md, and have that into a project where I can start just like asking questions of this world. Like, what does this person do? What does this person do? What happens when these people meet? Like, what does the day in the life of this thing look like? And can start kind of build the logic, like Claude will believe like whatever logic you build for it. And so you can just like start to think through and chat with it about like what a day in the life, or what the logic of this world dictates when you're kind of in there.
Very, very cool. Yeah, because it reminds me a little bit of I think George R. R. Martin had like a guy that had read all his books and actually knew the world better than he did, and he used to like consult him about like things that happened in the books. And I thought that was such an interesting idea, that like he had actually forgotten a lot of his own story, but he needed this consultant that knew the whole world. And I was like, that's actually kind of true. If you're reading like a really big novel, having AI that like could quickly like reach into a rag of all the of all the things that have happened, and then like, is this making sense? Am I getting too far off track? Because I do think that happens when you're writing fiction, is you can sort of like start to veer away, and these things can really be helpful at like keeping the world intact. So what was the dystopian job, or the utopian job? What was the job that you had just wrote about?
This one was software mechanic, and the idea is like, there's a lot of talk right now around spec-driven development, and like using specs, getting the gas towns and the Ralph loops to build it. And the idea is like, okay, let's assume that we figure out how to get that to work. People start, people in suburbs or urban areas, rural areas start to do that. Local people building stuff because they can just like type their specs into a chat box, and things go wrong for the same reason that they go wrong for us today.
With anything.
Yeah. A version changes somewhere and we didn't account for it, or, if we're regenerating software every time we change it, something might get reinterpreted. You're using, I don't know, the settings like roughly like 10 years from now. So it's like, maybe Claude 15 comes out, and when you regenerate something, something's interpreted differently. And so you need somebody that can, that thinks in systems to come in and like dig through all of that, where in the same way that, I'm sure there's a lot of local businesses that, or even e-commerce businesses that use Shopify, and that to you and me, the idea of, updating your site for, the holidays and putting like holiday sales up is like easy. There are a lot of consultancies out there that do that for people that run e-commerce businesses, right? And so it's kind of like that idea.
I like that, because I've always even talked about that for our agency. Like when people say to me like, oh, aren't you worried you're not going to get paid as much? I'm always like, well, I'm not going to get paid as much on the individual job. But one of the things that shifts, I think, when you become a business owner versus the engineer is you start to get a lot less picky about the type of work. And you're like for me, like we've tried that. I'm like, listen, I'll go after Shopify. If we got to be a Shopify agency, I'll be a Joomla agency again tomorrow. If I, as long as it keeps my lights on, I could find other ways to make myself excited about software on the side. But you start to separate the how do we keep the cash flow in versus, and that may not be the most glamorous work. And I think I talked, I recently had a plumber in the house who had to like snake the pipe out. And he wasn't even an official plumber. He's like, I just do drains. It was so funny because I had like another pipe that was dripping, and I like wanted to show him, and he goes, to be honest, I'm not a plumber. I just do the drains, and that's it. And it was called like $49.95 sewer and drain. I ended up spending $850, and I thought, that's a great freaking business, dude. Like, I was like, you come to snake a drain, and most of the time you're gonna have to snake the thing out to the road, and it's gonna cost them $800. And then he's like, if I got to do the camera and all that stuff. And so I was thinking like this could be the software thing too, where, hey, and we get these calls all the time. They're like, I built my thing in Cursor. Someone to just like run through it and figure out what's wrong. Like my car makes a noise and I don't know what the noise is. Can you look at it? And so we do that. And I think that's going to turn into almost like a, and Justin's going to hate me for saying this because I'm always like, I was like, I think we need to make the Firestone of software. And he's and I'm like, the Jiffy Lube, like you pull your car up. Yes, anybody can change their own oil, but most people still don't want to change their own oil. But for $100, I'll come up and do the thing. So if that becomes the case, we have to kind of think about this world where there's like tons of repairs that need to happen, and maybe that's not a bad thing because I still think that you'll find interesting problems to solve. I'm pretty convinced. Right.
Yeah, I mean, even like it was funny the day I published it, I saw a tweet of somebody who don't know their technical background, but they said they compared OpenClaw to kind of like the no code tools and kind of predicted like, I'm going to get this too complicated for me to be able to untangle. And so I'm probably going to need help. That's probably some work there. And so I think you're exactly right. It's more, and it was like stand up the other day where you were talking about kind of people vibe coding, fixes in their home.
Yeah.
In the past. I think a lot more people are starting to realize like I can DIY stuff on my computer now, but yeah, some of it's going to be like that pipe worked for a while and then it burst and everything flooded and all of your emails are deleted and now we need to get your life back on track kind of thing.
That's for sure. That's what I'm at war with. I tell people the vibe home repair because I'm finding things all over my house. Like for example, that pipe with the drip, and I'm just like, looking. I go, what was he? There was a shower there apparently that got like all capped off and removed because I'm looking at it. I go, it makes no sense why there's like 20 pipes in this spot. Like going to this end, like And I guess the old owner because I grew up on the same block where I live now, so like I end up living very close, but I knew this house and I knew the previous owner, and I go, man, these guys they made it like they knew really what they were doing, but I got wires stapled across the basement going in weird spots, and I think that you're going to end up with that, and then a proper person eventually has to come in and fix this stuff. And I've even seen OpenClaw setups for like $600. I saw that on Twitter the other day. I go, what a great business model. The first time I saw N8N, I was like, regular people can't figure this out. I said, it's going to be really cool if you were like a big business and someone like myself came in and set N8N up for you, which kind of feels, it might even seem easy to me because it's like, I know how all these things work, but then they're probably going to be like, great, come in, and here's like we got to be smarter as software engineers. Like here's a warranty, and I'm like, we feel bad with this. I go, by definition, they're not supposed to use the warranty. Like they're going to lose money on the warranty. Apple Care works because you don't use Apple. If everybody had to claim Apple Care, it wouldn't work. So we have to start thinking about like the alternate business model of software. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I imagine you've been incepted, but that's what the the title of that fiction story was, warranty void if regenerated. The whole idea is like, John Deere and like all the farm equipment right now is like there's a big fight, still a big fight around like right to repair. Like
Yeah,
that's just
yeah.
going to keep going, right? Like if you regenerate, you know, we come in, we set up your open cloth for $400 or $600, and you make some changes, like the warranty's void. Like that, I can't support the changes that you made, right?
That's it's so funny because we have a customer where it's like a similar situation where one of the stakeholders is fairly, they know enough to vibe code, they know enough to get, you know, to almost shoot themselves in the foot. And so like they've been kind of like introducing changes alongside the developer. And it's sort of introduced an interesting scenario where I was like, we have to update our contract to say exactly this. You have access to Git. If you vibe code something that breaks, it's definitely void. Like that's not covered under the you have the right to repair, but I have to charge you for the fix of your repair if you go and like it's like anything else, like with your car or whatever. It's like, yeah, you put an exhaust on and like I can't warranty that.
Yeah. I mean, I had that same experience in the city. I had like was having problems with my iMac and took it to like a local East Village repair shop. They couldn't fix it, and so I took it to the Apple store, and they were like, "It's been serviced by somebody like not Apple, so like we can't. It's not under warranty anymore. We can't even work on it." Like, oh my god, just ruined it.
I had it's so funny because I had a bad experience a few years ago with Dell. I had this Dell XPS, and it was like my first. It was so funny. It was my first jump that I was going to try and go like the Linux route and move away. And I had like Ubuntu, and I got the XPS with Ubuntu. There was just like the mouse trackpad was like lifted very slightly, and so I had Dell Repair come out. They sent somebody out, and it was like it needed one screw. I could have done it myself, and I should have done it myself because they broke the computer. It had to go back to Dell. It came back with Windows, and so I was like, all right, I guess I'll try Windows for a minute, and then it took me a long time to come back to Linux again. But it was so funny where I was like, I should have just did it myself. I was like, this guy's, I'm like watching him do it. I go, I think you're going to break it. And of course he just like, bro, and I was like, no. It's so interesting that there's like the right to repair. And then sometimes you just get bad repair people from these, from these folks. And I'm like, oh, well, Dell made it right, but it was definitely a frustrating moment for me. It's, that's going to be big too, I think, though, hardware. That whole like even still, I think phone repair is huge and all of that. So like I think that these are just things that like we don't have the robots. I know that everyone's like, no, there's going to be robots. I feel like every time I see videos of the robots, I'm like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I mean, I saw one where it did a cartwheel, and I was like, okay, that's cool, but can it like just like unscrew the back of a phone? Like I'm really not interested in the cartwheeling robot in my house.
Yeah. I heard I heard a take about that where it was like, you know, you look at Tesla, and they have so much real world driving recording data, and like it's still not 100% like autonomous. You still have to have your hands on the wheel, and like and that's driving, you know, the amount of data and amount of training and the amount of like advances we're going to need to have like that thing in your house repairing your devices, or like walking around doing your laundry and cleaning your windows. Like I think that's further off than a lot of people think, but I could be wrong.
Too. I agree with that. I think that the factory floor kind of thing makes sense, like that type of stuff. But I've even, I've been to these different, it's just, I don't know. And also the other business owners, like around here, we have a lot of mechanics, auto body shops. The thing I think that Silicon Valley like underestimates is how long it takes for those owners to do something like the owner of my local, like the best body shop that we go to here, is not going to just buy a robot the day it comes out and like start letting it work. And like, it's going to take years for them they're going to really have to see it to believe it, kind of thing. But the other thing that happens, though, is now the robots need to get fixed because things happen, right? Like the robot was working and the car fell on the robot, or like there was even just the Teslas is a great example, because we were looking at doing some software work for a local body shop, and they're really large, and they do really, really well. It made me rethink some life choices. I was like, man, maybe we should be opening a body shop. I was like, but he's like he's like, every time these Teslas get into an accident, he's like, all the cameras got to be repaired, they all got to get recalibrated. He's like, it's so much more expensive to have an accident now than it ever used to be. So the promise of maybe if the cars were self-driving, they wouldn't crash is not happening. But when they do crash, it is vastly more expensive to fix your car than it ever was, and it requires a very specialist technician to come in and do all of those repairs. So I think that there's going to be a whole bunch of new stuff as we stick more like IoT devices and software into all these things.
Yeah.
Very cool. So yeah, I love the concept though of the newsletter. Like I think that'll be really fun because it reminds me of some of these old Twitter accounts. Like there was one that was like Seinfeld of modern day, and it would like do problems of Seinfeld. There was another one that was like an IT person at Hogwarts, and that was like, I used to think that was hysterical too. It's like they're like, we keep trying to run the internet and the staircases are moving and like all the wires are ripping. I was like, this guy's a genius. It was great. Huh. There's a lot that can happen. So it's very, very interesting. So kind of coming into now your event, Artificial Ruby. What I was so impressed by, because I kind of came back to Ruby with AI only because I had used it, I want to say years and years ago, and then I kind of went the TypeScript route, and then I was building with AI in TypeScript, and I just kept seeing these type errors blow up, and I was like, this thing is chewing up my context. I was like, I know I like types. I've considered myself a type-driven person, but I think I'm gonna try something different. And I went back to Rails, and I never looked back. I was like, it just changed. I was like, wow. The hunch turned out to be right. The type errors, all that, it was actually just chewing up tons and tons of context. So I come back into Ruby, and then the language being concise, all of the things that people talk about, I was like, this is actually really good for AI, and people don't usually think of that and Ruby together. Everybody was like, you're not writing TypeScript and Python, and I was like, actually, I kind of moved away, and I even moved away from React. And so I saw your event, and I thought, this is kind of interesting because I don't picture like artificial intelligence and Ruby together. So it's really interesting that you what was the inspiration for that?
Yeah, so I mean, like we talked about earlier, like when I got into Ruby, it was like this like explosion of creativity. There was just like everybody was trying, like, all of the slowness of like enterprise programming of like Java, where like people were throwing that off, and they're like, I can do stuff now. I can like try all these ideas, and like it was just a wild time. Like every week, it was just like Hacker News was full of some new libraries that came out. Like even like different testing DSLs, there were like 2 or 3 launched each week. It was just like this like Cambrian Enlightenment period of just like crazy stuff. And like I'd always that kind of died down through the early 2010s, but like it always tried to like get back to that feeling, and spent a lot of time. Well, like, why was that? Well, like Ruby's really flexible. Like if you had an idea, you could whip it up. You could write it up in an afternoon. You could send it to me. It would be just like a little bit of code. I could see it and be like, oh, that's a cool idea. Like, and we start riffing. We start, going back and forth on it. Other more verbose languages, you can't do that as easily. And my thinking with, getting into AI with Sublayer was, that's going to be really important in AI because like this changes everything. Like a lot of times good ideas start out looking like bad ideas. And if it's going to take you 2 weeks to try something, you're not going to try as many bad ideas as if they like took you 20 minutes. And so like that was my like, this is the logic for going all in on Ruby, and I'm going to keep doing it. And like started having successes. And then every investor I talked to, like I spoke at a conference back in like 2023 and got a question like, do you even consider Rails a success story? And I'm like, I felt like so out of place in the world because like Ruby was just like so out of the zeitgeist at the time.
It's still, well, I still get that sometimes. And I'm like, well, first of all, if you look at the history of startups that have been built with Rails, I'm like, mega success through. And not only that, when even like the classic like the slowness of Ruby, But then you find out Stripe, even though it's not Rails, they use Ruby for everything.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, well, this is like a ridiculous kind of notion. And then the readability, that was like another piece that came back for me, because I realized that one of the things I liked about TypeScript was in my IDE, it would help like when I went to call a function, like I could see the function signatures. I'm not opening my IDE all that much anymore. And so like, I'm like, actually, this is your problem now. Like, I was like, it's really more important that I can read the business logic. And I love like things like unless, like just simple like idioms like that, where I'm like, man, this makes it so much easier to run through things and see through all the cruft. And I think Python can be very similar too, in that world. Just a more readable language, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, like, Python, very, a lot of similarities. I think the thing that I, also latched onto with Ruby was something I demoed I did on stage at RubyConf and Madison Ruby, was this, just showing that like you can try stupid ideas, and if a stupid idea turns out good, it's like one line to monkey patch it into the entire language. Like there's no ceremony you need to do. And like the thing I demoed was this module called synonym, which was you can call methods by synonym. And so like if you're just guess at a method name, and if it's close enough, it'll call it. But sorry, digress. Little off topic. But so the event, like, that was happening. I was getting like, why Ruby? Like, don't you do AI and TypeScript and Python? I was like, I'm sure there's more people out there. And so we were like, let's just have a happy hour. Let's put a Luma up and just like tell people and see what happens. And we were like, if we get 10 people out to the bar, like we can just like hang out with our friends, and that'll be a success. And something like 60 people showed up, and just like it spread around, people shared it. And for a couple months, it was just like let's get together, let's have some drinks, let's reminisce on like, and it was a lot of people that were like in New York City in the early 2010s, in the like heyday of Rails being the, I like to say like Rails is the framework of IPOs through the 2010s. Like
it really was.
Many massive companies that are public now were like originally built on Rails.
That was what brought me to it. Like at this agency I was working at, we were doing a lot of Node like front end work, but we had to build this product, and the original product was built. This was pre Next.js, so it was built in React and had like an Express backend. But man, it was so freaking annoying. There were so many like annoying things about the backend. Working in Node at that time, there was like a lot of warts, and so I said, I think I'm gonna just do. Let's pick Rails. I heard good things about it. And within a week, like the person I was working with, she and I had like fully picked it up. And I was like, okay, you can't get much better than that in terms of like language mechanics and everything. I'm like, man, it was just incredible. And then we were handwriting all the code too. So I was like, it had to be readable, and all the magic that the DHH had talked about, it really kind of came to fruition. And I had not even gotten into like the meta programming side of things yet, and all of that. And that's now where some of my interest, like you talked about, like coming up with a quick DSL, and now I'm like diving in. And it's so interesting, because I think the other thing a lot of people think is like when you pick a framework like Rails, it almost the engineer in us wants to tweak and like build it up from scratch, and then you don't realize, you're like, actually there's still a lot to build. There's still a million things, and there's still new gems being released, and new ways of doing things. The thing that I got very exhausted by with the TypeScript community, I think, or the JavaScript community, is it feels like we're reinventing the same thing over and over again. Like even like the last release, I keep telling people, I'm like, we had Next.js in a great place. I was using TRPC and I loved it. And then the following year, it was like, oh, forget about that. We're going to app router, and we're doing app this and this. And I'm like, but it didn't do anything new for me. It was just, it just made it so all my old code bases looked really old, and I felt like I needed to like rebuild them again in this new way. And I got a project that was like upgrading like an old Ruby 3 app, a Ruby on Rails 3 app. And at the time I was playing around with Rails 8, and I said, oh, the core mechanics look super similar. There were things, but it was overall, I was like, wow, isn't it really nice to like not have to like learn like rewrite all my controllers again in some new way, because controllers worked fine the way they were, and maybe there's some new nice things. And then they came out with no build, which was that was something I was always very interested in, because I had like ideas like that, because the build process was starting to take a long time. Again, going back to agentic development, I've got agents churning out code, and I'm like, and now I got to wait for the dev server. I was like, this is freaking annoying, man. And everybody was complaining about the same thing. They're like, you finding that the dev server is taking a long time? I go, yeah, I am. I was like, I think we got to switch to, I was even like Laravel. I was like, maybe it's a PHP. Like, I was like, we just got to go back to the old dynamic language, because I cannot wait for this any more than I'm already waiting for things. Yeah. So it really kind of came, it's amazing to me how much I've fallen in love with it too, all these years later, having kind of been so far from it. And in a lot of ways, AI kind of brought me back to the Ruby world, because it had so many benefits.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, I was thinking of the thing we were talking about last night, where you were giving the analogy of like drums and guitar, and like you can kind of look at what we were just talking about with Rails and like learn it in a week, or like, people can experiment. Like that's the drum, and I think you did it on the last podcast too, the last episode. But like you can play drums immediately. You can have fun with drums immediately. Guitar takes a lot of practice, right?
Yep. That's what I love about. That's the thing. It's like, but to be a great drummer, it's just as hard, if not harder. Like, and I remember this learning drums too. Like I was like, wait, you have to read music to play? I was like, yeah, if you're going to play drums properly, you do have to learn to read music. This kind of brings up like another, it's kind of side point about the way people are looking at AI. They're like, oh, I don't need to code. And I'm like, I don't know if that's ever going to be true, where you don't need some time to manually code and kind of build your knowledge of what it is like to write code by hand. And the thing that I kind of think back, that I kind of point it to, take like a professional baseball player. Somebody might be a pitcher, but they can still play left field better than you. Like I still expect them to go out and be able to catch a fly ball. They're better than the average person, probably at all positions, right? I don't watch a lot of sports, so I'm going to use people from when I was a kid. I'm probably going to pick Andy Pettit to play third base on my softball team over the third baseman in my high school. I expect that he'd be able to handle that fine. And I think the same thing is with drums too. You could probably get by, or even with guitar, playing with tabs. But I think when you start to take it the next level, you're probably going to say, well, I want to know how to read the music, because I want to learn more music theory, because I want to do this correctly. And I think that, even famous, I don't know. I'd be curious to know, like a Jimi Hendrix, who like famously played by ear. I'd imagine that at some point he learned some, like he could see like he could read some, and maybe that's like the exception to the rule. He's just amazing, or a savant or something. But it's the same thing. I think by using AI, you're going to avoid code, but you're going to be confronted eventually with the idea that I have to kind of get good at much more of this if I want to do this professionally.
Totally. But you can have a lot more fun without putting a lot of time in, or you can start having fun without having to put a lot of time in, which I think we're going to see a lot more people kind of realize that and participate, that kind of were put off before,
Yep. Well, this was, and you came into this the way I did, not classically educated. Like people told me like, oh, you shouldn't learn jQuery before you learn JavaScript, or at the time it was like prototype, and I definitely did, and I definitely went through a period where like jQuery suddenly wasn't cool, and I had to like do the vanilla JavaScript thing, and I freaking did it. Like I figured, and eventually like then it was CoffeeScript and TypeScript, but at every step there's always some gatekeeper that's like, you can't learn Rust unless you've learned C first. And you're like, maybe you can. Maybe you can never really learn Rust. That's my ongoing joke. But it's like, but there's always somebody out there that's like, no, you can't do this until you do that.
Yeah, it's funny, but I mean, I think the thing that like, well, the jQuery thing reminds me of that startup SaySpring. This was 2016. like way out of the jQuery popularity. Using jQuery was, you know, a, not a thing people did back then. And I remember getting a question from another startup like, what's your front end framework? And I'm like, 150 lines of jQuery. And like still just like it got the job done, and like that's really the thing that matters at the end of the day, right?
That's exactly right. And jQuery is still like apparently everywhere. Like I haven't seen it in a long time, and but I do remember that it was. I mean, we built these like integrations at this one company I worked at. The whole thing, if the site didn't have jQuery, we would like add the library. And now I like think back on that, you'd never do that now, because I guess vanilla JavaScript got a lot better, and the self-updating browsers, but the things we used to go through that people don't think about too, the cross-browser testing is totally not a thing anymore. Like, it's, or at least I consider it not a thing. Every now and then something will come up, and I remember being in like CSS, I used to put like a \9 to target IE9. Like they were like I had this one article, I wish I could find it, had these like weird little CSS tricks to target the different IE versions, and I was like, this is so I'm so glad that that's over.
That was the majority of my work at that design agency, was like getting it to work at each IE version, and like the things you had to do, like the VMs you had to set up with a particular version of IE installed so that you could like start to test it, is even the step before actually figuring out how to get the CSS to do the thing. It's like, how do I get this computer to use this particular version of IE that the customer is like, it doesn't work in this one.
Yep. Yeah, well, yeah, I remember spending like late nights we used to build these like a page that was just like a gallery of images, and it would take all night to get it right, pixel perfect, and like and then responsive became a thing, and but like nobody gave you a responsive design, so like you were dealing with all of this. It was, oh my god, like those. Programming took a long freaking time. Like even before AI, it was speeding up a lot just by virtue of like the tooling getting better. But man, it took a long time to build some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so here's another interesting. You were mentioning how now you do a lot of AI training in companies, kind of helping them adopt. And one of the big things last night that you had mentioned is some of it is just like getting the engineers to have permission to even do this, and there's like a father at my son's school. He's an engineer, doesn't use AI at all. Like it's so interesting to me, because inside our little bubble of like social and the meetups we go to, everybody's all excited about this, but there's a very big world out there where nobody's using AI yet. So what are the learnings from like going into these companies? What types of companies you're going into, and what are some of the questions? Like, what are the most common questions you get?
It's kind of all over the map, and it's been right now I'm mostly working with like bigger enterprises, and working with these engineering teams that last year adoption was kind of slow. It was like, yeah, we're using Copilot, we're using Cursor or something, but mostly spend most of our time writing code by hand, and it. Actually, looking back at I did like the annual retrospective in the newsletter, and like looking back, that like Cloud Code came out in the beginning of last year. Like it feels like, because we use it all the time, it feels like it's been around forever, but like it hasn't been around that long. Right. I think it went general availability in something like May last year, which is just like bonkers, right?
Yeah, it does. You're right, because I really don't. I mean, I remember like just the year before that trying Cursor and just not being very impressed. Like the tab with it was like a tab autocomplete type system, and I was like, nah, this is gonna take forever. Like I remember you had to go through every file, and then you'd get into a bad state and it couldn't unfuck itself basically, and you're like, God, no, I went too far, and I was like, I actually would rather write the code by hand. So if that was your experience, you probably just like never went back to it.
Yeah. Remember like the chat box in Cursor, and it was like, do you want to change these 3 lines of code? And you're like, yes, no, yeah. But so yeah, just like how fast things have changed, and like how much time you have to spend to just like get it into your head of like, I spent all my time learning Cursor, and now I don't open an IDE anymore. and just like the speed of that change is like nothing we've seen in the industry before. So mostly been working with enterprises, and now I'm starting to like explore kind of smaller like Series B, Series C startup teams. But like everybody, especially after like this winter with like Claude Code, people are starting to like jump into it. And a lot of the questions were, like I can get Cursor to do this. I can get, Copilot to do this, but like what's the next step? Or I tried using one of these agentic tools, and it gave me the wrong code. Or actually, one of my favorites was I asked it to do a PR review, and it ran the tests, and I'm like, well, if you just said do a PR review, there are like a million ways to interpret what PR review means. Like if I did a PR review, I'd probably pull the code down and run your tests too, or at least like look at CI to make sure that they pass.
Yeah.
And so like what you mean, you actually need to like explain what you mean by PR review. Is there a template that your company uses? Is there certain things that you're responsible for? Like, is it the, authentication or the payment gateway or whatever it is that you're the one reviewing, or you're the code owner for? And what do you look for? Or does this person who you're reviewing, do they typically get like certain things? They typically don't, they don't load it on Android and test it on Android or whatever it is.
Right.
You have to like explicitly say that, like the things that, you and I, if we were working together, we'd build up a knowledge of like, oh, when Scott says like PR review, this is what he means. You need to write that into a markdown file. You need to like actually spell that out every time you make that request.
Right. Or at least have that stuff shared, like that's definitely, and I loved your exercise from your last newsletter, which is, hey, like try to get these results from using just a prompt. And I'm like, that's actually kind of the way, like, and it's interesting. It's sort of like a TDD, like the way, like when I was using Code Dojo, it'll say, these are the tests that you need to get to pass. And so you write the code to the test. Now it's just one layer removed. Like, this is what you need to pass. Now you need to prompt to get the code. And if you want your functions designed a certain way, figure out how to get it to do that. Mm-hmm. And there is a way to do that. And like, what's the perfect combination of things? And I've seen a lot, like I do a lot though, with just like the basic Claude MD file and then my prompts. A lot of people are now speaking into the prompts. I've been told that's like kind of a new, and I'm like, well, maybe that like reduces, but then some people do the skills, there's the beads, there's the, there's all these other different ways that, and to get what you want out of the thing. But I think at its very core, simply trying to do prompt to the thing you want is going to teach you quite a bit about, and I think every tool does it a little different. Like if you're used to working with Claude, that's why I've invested so much time in Claude. Not only because I think that the pricing of $200 a month right now is probably the best it's going to be for, for a bit. But if I was using Codex, I'd have to learn the way of, I'd say like you have the guitars behind you, right? Like different guitars play differently, and you kind of got to, like, the strings are going to feel a little different, and that kind of thing. It's the same concept of, if I'm using Grok, it's going to have a different feel. And even if you use it just to research, sometimes I'll ask all three, and they'll all kind of have like a little different slant, similar to like a newspaper will have a different slant. So you have to, I don't know, it's just a different way of kind of obtaining information, right, of thinking about things. And I'm always curious. I think a lot less engineers are doing it than we think, and they just have to spend some time with it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So good stuff. It's so Justin and I do a lot of the talks though, for like, we did some talks at like the local libraries here. We get like the other way, a lot of folks that are, cause we were doing like an AI kind of 101 type thing. And, we get a lot of older people that are like, and it's just so funny because like the statistic I use is like, boomers are like, what do they control, like 70% of the wealth or something like that. Most of them are barely aware of ChatGPT, and like, someone was trying to get me to like get a Python script to run, and he like brings his computer over at the end of the event, and it was just like, it was a Python script. All the code was like against the side, like right against one line, like, and like in a doc file. And he was like, how do I just like get this to run? And like the first thing I thought was like, oh man, I was like, I don't know PowerShell. Like it was a Windows computer. So I was like, but secondly, I was like, I think you needed the indents. Like I was like, yeah, I was like, you can't. I don't think this is gonna work. But again, it was like one of these things. Like ChatGPT is like, here, take this and do this, and then I had pointed him to like Bolt and VC. I said, I was like, you need to be a level above. Like you're not ready for the terminal tool yet. Like he was able to like open it up and do that. But I was like, you need to go like to one of these tools where you're in a sandboxed environment and not like risking bricking your computer right now beyond repair. So it was it's super cool because more people are into software than ever before. So it's going to be good stuff. So next Artificial Ruby event is next week on the 25th, right? Mm-hmm. So if people are watching and in New York City, where I love to kind of finish it up with, like, you should come to that event. It's awesome. And it's in Meatpacking District at, what's this? Man, I can't remember. BetaWorks. That's it. Yeah. So definitely should check it out and sign up. We love to finish these up with a piece of advice that you would have for the new generation. Someone just getting into software, someone just starting out. What's one piece of advice that you think is timeless that you would give today?
I think it's actually the time right now reminds me a lot of the time that we graduated, like that time 2008, or actually it's probably even more brutal than that. Then I feel like I really feel for people graduating into this world, but kind of like what we just talked about, the gatekeepers are gone because this thing is so new that like nobody knows how to use it. Like we're all beginners at agentic coding. Some of us come, actually kind of what we were talking about last night around this is that, a lot of learning how to agentic code from somebody who's a programmer is unlearning the things that you thought you knew, of just like, oh, I don't need to care about that anymore. I don't need to do that anymore. And so people that are just starting out, they don't have that baggage. But what they do have to do is, spend the time experimenting and just like constantly be doing stuff, because that's where the advantage is. That like the one example I use a lot is, so like when we were in college, online poker became a huge thing. I don't know if you were a big online poker person, but everybody was playing online poker at the time. But I think one of the really interesting things about it was like before that, the only way to get really good at poker was to spend your entire life in card rooms playing. And so like when online poker came out, you had college kids who were able to play like 10 tables at the same time 24/7 and like play 100,000 hands a week or something, where like most people's lives, you get like 30 hands an hour at a card room. And so like that volume completely changed things. And you saw like even, the World Series of Poker, when we were in college, it was like half 60 years old or older and like half 23-year-olds. And that like that was because those 23-year-olds were able to do like that same amount of volume in the time it took most people's entire careers. And I think that same thing's happening with software or even kind of every field right now. You have the opportunity to like do the amount of volume, do the amount of experiments, and like learn with your hands-on learn that would take most people that you're competing with jobs for entire career to get there.
Really, really true. That's like the realization I've had working with this Code Dojo tool, is like it's really just like a prompt for Claude. And I'm like, I could learn assembly. Like I would never, like with my kids, I would never have time to learn that. I have no use for it, but I still wanted to learn it. And so I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Like, and it makes me type it, as opposed to reading a book where it's like, here are the exercises and nobody does them. You're like, okay, I got to keep reading. This like makes you do it. So you've never had a easier time to learn. And like you think about the volume, of another Long Island kind of sport that I always said was very hard to get good at is surfing, because most of the time when you go out, there's no waves. So I said, you're like paddling out, and like every time you miss a wave, that was an opportunity to practice that like you lost. Like you don't get, it takes so long because you don't get the reps, as opposed to like a snowboarding where it's like run down the hill, run back up, run down the hill, run back up. So you get that same effect with agentic and the tooling we have now, where it's like build programs, build programs, build programs, have it quiz you, try something crazy, let it break, throw it all out again, start over again. You're going to get a lot more reps in than you ever would.
Right.
And then the other question I always have is any good book recommendations? Recently, could be fiction, could be nonfiction. I've been reading The Layered Design from Ruby, but I always ask that because I love hearing this.
God, I've got a bunch here. I don't know which one to pick. Well, another thing. So I've been like, everything that I do now, it's like, I wonder what does AI augmented version of this look like? And found a book club that I don't have the time to actually participate in, but one of the things that they suggest is like reading a book with an LLM. And so at the beginning of the year, I'd never really read any of the like classics, or if I did in high school, I didn't retain any of it. But one of the books that they suggested that I started with was Candide by Voltaire. And like, wow. It's one of those books there's just like tons of, there's tons of analyses, like all of the translations are open. And so like, you can just ask Claude, like, which translation should I read? And it's like, you should read this one because of blah, 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 blah. And then you start reading it and you're like, on chapter 3, it says this, like, what the hell is he talking about? And it'll like engage with you on it. And so like, I read Candide. I don't know if I would really recommend it, but I've started reading Kafka in the same way, like those kind of books that are like, just finished Metamorphosis. And like, I know a lot of people read it in school, but like reading it with an LLM and just being like, this like, now that I have this experience and all this stuff, and like, what does he mean here? Or this didn't really land. Is this a translation issue? Or is this like, you have just this like, infinitely patient teacher that you can just like chat with and like say the stupidest shit to, and it's not going to make fun. It might make fun of you, but it's a robot, so who cares? And so that's a long-winded way of saying like, try reading maybe Metamorphosis, but like maybe just like some of those books that you're like, I'm sure this is good, but like, in the same way that I wish I had time to learn assembly, like I wish I had time to like read these classics. You have an LLM that can like help you retain it, help you like explore it in a way that you really couldn't before.
I love that, because that is exactly how I read like even some of these books I'm reading now. They'll give like even code samples and stuff, and you could take a picture of the code sample like and just say like, I actually don't, and it's not like, and I've noticed that like I'm like, wait, I'm not exactly sure. And there's a lot of stuff like that, even in languages you're familiar with, where you're like, I've just always done that because I've always seen it done that way, but is that actually necessary? And like, I can actually say that. I'd be like, wait a minute, like, what does that mean? Is that really? And it's like, actually, no, that could be anything, and you don't need to do it that way, but that's just the way people, it's just incredible how it knows all this history. And so it is, if used correctly, you can learn in a better way than ever before.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, this has been an awesome talk, Scott. Finally,
it was great.
Where can people find you?
So I'm primarily write on worksonmymachine.ai, the Substack, nearzero.software, also the Substack if you're interested in the fiction. That's the Works on My Machine's my primary, usually like weekly, some kind of software, some kind of like story around like what the software is. Chat with me. I've got a Discord, the link to the Discord's there. LinkedIn, Twitter, are my, primary hangouts.
Same. So that's awesome. We will link all of that in the show notes. So anybody who's looking will get all that linked up. And Scott, it's been amazing.
Mike, yeah, really appreciate you having me, and this is fun. It's been awesome to meet you. I'm glad you guys found Artificial Ruby and came over and said hi. And Long Island Technologists meetup last night was a ton of fun. So yeah, thanks for putting that on.
Absolutely, it's only growing, and it was amazing to meet you. It was like one of those things where it was like the last minute we were like, do we really want to go to the city? We're like, we're going. So it's probably, I encourage people to get out of the house. That's the lesson. Get out
I'm
of
glad.
the house.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have a good one, everybody.
Cool. See ya.